Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolfpack again. Wolfpack the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolfpack to midfield. Miles Wolfpack with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, one fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Howe showing the toughness for 6. Mario's down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. But now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They are going to play for left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here as always, getting you ready on a Friday night for Carolina's game against the North Carolina State Wolfpack, the biggest rivalry of the season, and we are here to get you ready for it here on tonight's edition of the podcast. Of course, we also have some recruiting notes that we have to get to as well, so make sure that you guys stick around for those recruiting notes that we'll have at the end for you. It's not going to be a full breakdown. That will be later on this weekend or early next week, where I will get to that for you guys. Of course, we have National Signing Day that's coming up on Wednesday, and but we have to get to NC State here tonight because there is a lot to talk about with the NC State Wolfpack this year as Carolina looks to end their 4-game losing streak to them. And so let's dive right into it. Carolina looking to close out the regular season with a win against NC State. And yes, position themselves to possibly make a bowl game. I know that sounds weird, but Carolina is the top team in APR of the 5 and 7 teams, which means that if they were to win, and there were enough bowl teams that did not qualify at the 6 and 6 mark, then Carolina would be one of the teams that would receive a chance to go to a bowl game. What it tells me is that there are too many bowl games, to be really honest with you. We've seen it each and every year. It feels like there's a new one that seems to pop up. And now, I mean, there's so many teams that make it to the postseason that you are going to have teams that are going to be under 500, that are going to make it to bowl season more than likely this year. And so Carolina wants to be one of those teams. While I don't agree that it's necessarily the greatest look to have a team that is 5 and 7 playing in a bowl game, I do think that the added practices could be very beneficial for Carolina. And so if they do get the opportunity to take a bowl game, I think they probably should end up taking that game. But in order to do it, they're going to have to beat the NC State Wolfpack. The Tar Heels lead the all-time series 68-40. And 6, the last 4 matchups between the two sides have gone NC State's way after Carolina won the previous 2. So this is one that Carolina really wants to get. And, you know, we talked about last week, you know, bringing the right mentality to the game for Carolina against Duke. I thought, you know, in terms of the effort level, Carolina was there. They brought a little bit of fire, but maybe a little bit too much fire. I think that's going to be one of the big messages again in this game against NC State, to be maybe a little bit calmer than they were a week ago, but still bring similar fire to a team that we know, as we have seen, especially under Dave Doran, is going to bring a lot of fire with them into this matchup, because this is the matchup that matters the most for them mean, they're a team that's 6-5 on the season, and we'll talk about them a little bit more here in depth. But for them, none of the wins matter as much as the win that they could possibly pick up on Saturday. That's the same mindset that Carolina has to have going into this game if they want to find a way to win.
And look, it's the biggest game of the year on the calendar for NC State. It is every year, and Dave Doran made it known last week when they want to get to bowl eligibility what he expected from this weekend's crowd. And look, we're not too far removed from hearing what he called our players and our program. And that's why they have thrived in the rivalry. He's gotten his kids, which are generally get less gifted than ours, to care more about beating us than we've been able to get our guys to care about beating them. And, Bill Belichick made it known this week that, it didn't take him long to find out just how important this game is, how much it matters to us as fans, because rivalry games, they're the bloodline of the sport. They are what make college football so great and so different than what you see even in the NFL with some of the historic rivals that you see at that level of football. There's just a different feeling, a different energy, a different vibe around those games in college. And so Carolina, yes, needs to play with an emotion, and they need to play with the fever that was somewhat similar to what they played with a week ago, but it's got to be controlled. The margin of error is not to where you can commit 15-yard penalties, 6 times in the final 7 minutes of a ball game and expect to win. So, Bill Belichick, I think, needs this to salvage what's a lost season. He needs this to salvage the fact that you've lost your 2 other games to in-state opponents in Wake Forest and Duke. And I think the game is winnable. But it has been the last handful of games here. Carolina's got to play a certain way. And this has got to be a game where they're able to impact their will more than NC State's, because NC State has an offense that can score just about anybody in the country. They've had a pretty productive year on that side of the ball, but this is a defense that they're a place to be made. They're a place to be had. And hopefully Carolina can build off what they did really well a week ago in the passing game, because they should be able to hit some explosives in this game. And they're going to need to be if they want to walk out of Carter Finley with a win.
Yeah, I think, explosives are definitely, part of the game plan for Carolina. I mean, this is a defense in NC State, as we'll talk about here in a minute, that's going to give you some opportunities to hit explosive plays. But, I mean, for Carolina, it's just about playing within your identity. This defense has to be able to bounce back from what we've seen the last few weeks out of them, and they've got to put together one of their strongest performances, because this is a team that, while they haven't had a great season necessarily for NC State, this is still a team that has a chance to win 8 games this year, which, would be right about where many people would expect after a down year for NC State for them to rebound to. So they're going to be motivated to come in and do that. For Carolina, I think it's important that, for this game, they come in, with the mentality that this is their season. This is about building some momentum towards next year, because who knows if you actually are going to be going to a bowl game. If you lose this game, then there is absolutely no chance that you're going to a bowl game, and the season ends there, and that's it. If you win this game, you may have a chance to build on some of that momentum that you could gain in this one and build, put it towards next season, which is ultimately what really this game means for this group, is really about starting to build on next season. But I mean, this would feel great if this team, one of the lesser teams that we've seen in recent years here at Carolina, probably the worst teams that we've seen since those 2017, 2018 teams that Larry Fedora had here, if they were able to find a way to pull an upset in Raleigh and get that victory, that would feel as good as just about any of the victories that Carolina has had recently. They'll have their work cut out for them, though. A 6-5 football team for NC State, 3-4 in conference play. Offensively, they're averaging 29.1 points a game, 397.8 yards of total offense per game. 252 of it comes through the air. 145.8 of it comes on the ground. CJ Bailey, having a really solid season. There's nothing that's overly spectacular. He's not going to blow you away. He's not the top quarterback in the conference by any stretch of the imagination, but he's thrown for 2,683 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. That's pretty solid for him so far this year. He's also ran for 150 yards and 74 attempts and 5 touchdowns. So he's not a guy that's going to run often, but he is a guy that has the ability to get out of the pocket and make plays. That's something that even coming into last week, we didn't see necessarily in the stats from Darian Mensah, but he showed in that game that he has that ability. And so Carolina's got to be aware of that in this game as well against CJ Bailey. Don't allow him to pick up some of those first downs that Darian Mensah was able to pick up a week ago. You go to their ground game, really successful unit so far this year. Hollywood Smothers at running back. He is averaging 6.1 yards per carry. He's got 907 yards and 6 touchdowns so far this year on 148 carries. Then there's Jaden Scott, who's finished the season strong, 82 carries, 460 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Hollywood Smothers has been banged up a little bit, so that's why they've had to use Jaden Scott a little bit more, and he has had some pretty nice success. You go to the pass-catching group. It's a very good one for NC State. Now, they don't have one guy that's really having a monster season. Their tight end, Justin Jolie, is probably their best receiver out of the group. 42 catches, 438 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He leads the team in receptions. But then you got Terrell Anderson, 36 catches, 596 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's a 16.6 yard average. So that's the explosive playmaker that they have there. Teddy Huffman is another guy that is a little banged up coming into this game, but 23 catches, 299 yards, 2 touchdowns. Noah Rogers, 29 catches, 374 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not nearly the type of production that you would expect from the former 5-star receiver, but certainly a guy that could be a threat in this game. And then also you have Keenan Jackson, another name that Tar Heel fans should be familiar with, a guy who was committed to Carolina at one point, 26 catches, 250 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Wesley Grimes, another explosive playmaker on the outside for them when he wants to be, 21 catches, 321 yards, and a touchdown. All that means that they have 6 receivers that have at least 250 yards receiving this year. No one over 600 yards, but a bunch of different guys that they can spread the football around to. And then when you go to their offensive line, this is a group that's having a relatively successful year. Not nearly as good as the ones that NC State has had in the past, but I would say it's in decent shape, led by Jacarius Peak, the offensive tackle. But they have allowed some pressure so far this year, somewhat similar to the offensive line that Duke brought to the table last week. Peak is the only guy of the starters that hasn't allowed double-digit pressures, but the good news for them, if you're an NC State fan, is that there aren't a lot of sacks that have been allowed by that group this year. So that's going to be a challenge for Carolina coming into this game. They got to be better than they were a week ago, matched up against the Duke defensive or offensive line when we thought that this defensive line could have a chance to tee off. But overall, pretty solid offensive group that Carolina is going to be going up against for NC State.
It's a different feel than what you're used to seeing from a Dave Doran football team. You're used to seeing them want to kind of run the ball, possess the ball, because they've been so good defensively. But that's not the case this year. They're one of the worst defenses in the ACC. One of the worst defenses really in all of college football, which means they've had to rely on their offense. And, they need, to pretty much get to 30 every single week, it's felt like, to give themselves a chance. They're kind of, in a weird way, it's not the same. It doesn't look the same. Kind of like where Carolina was at in some years with Sam Howell, where they had to get points to win, because they just could not stop anybody. And I think what's going to really make this game plan difficult for Steve Belichick and the defensive side of the ball is, as you mentioned, 6 dudes got over 250 yards receiving. So they spread the football around. Now, Gress, Jolie is maybe their main and most explosive pass target, but they're going to get Noah Rogers involved. They're going to get some of those other guys involved. So virtually, like every guy on the field, you have to account for, quite literally. Not that you're not whenever you're game planning, but we know the Belichick school of thought, you're going to take away their best playmaker, make their other guys beat them. Well, the thing is their other guys are capable of making big plays and explosive plays. So Carolina's going to have their hands full with this passing game. Just kind of, it's a little bit different than what you saw last week with Duke, where a lot of that was like Mensa driven, where, Mensa is an NFL quarterback. I don't know what Bailey's going to end up turning out to be. I think it really depends on if he stays at NC State or maybe transfers, because I think we expect a school like Miami to come after him. But as good as he is individually, they have surrounded him with a pretty good collection of talent. And what you got to be mindful of is once they get the ball rolling in the passing game, that's really when they're able to run the football. They're going to throw to set up the run. And at different times this year, you've seen this offense when it's firing all cylinders. It's really tough to stop. So it's going to be a line of scrimmage game, I think, for Carolina. Your defensive line has had back-to-back less than stellar outings. You're going to need them to bounce back in a big way, because it starts up front with their ability to get pressure on the quarterback will go a long way to determining if they can hold up on the back end with this pass-catching group that's as versatile as Carolina has seen all season long.
You go to the defensive side of the ball for State, 29.7 points per game allowed, 425.2 yards of total offense, 291.1 of it comes through the air, 144.1 comes on the ground. That 291.1 passing yards allowed per game is the most of anyone in college football. And you would say, well, maybe in recent weeks they have gotten a little bit better in that area. Look, they allowed 203 yards to Thomas Castellanos and Florida State. That's, not a great number even for Florida State. I mean, their offense hasn't necessarily been explosive in the passing game, but you go back to the previous game prior to that, that's where they allowed 367 yards to Miami. So this is a group that's been pretty bad throughout the entire year. It doesn't feel like they're going to be in any sort of rhythm coming into this game, and so Carolina should hopefully be able to exploit that. The defensive line, once again, the strength of the unit led by Sebastian Harsh and Sion Sloan. Those are guys that have gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback so far this year, so that's certainly something that I think Carolina has to be aware of. I mean, Harsh, so far this season, 35 total quarterback pressures, but has only gotten 4 sacks out of it. Sion Sloan, very similar, 29 total quarterback pressures, 2 sacks. The good news for Carolina is that that's really it in terms of the guys who get pressure. It's not nearly as built up as it's been in years past. Brandon Cleveland is a solid defensive tackle, but he's not a guy that's necessarily going to be getting after the quarterback. So there's really 2 guys that you have to worry about. This is where your tackles really need to play well in this game for Carolina. You need, whether it's Miles McVay or Jordan Hall, they need to step up for Carolina, and you need Ja'Kai Moore to be able to play at a pretty high level in what will be his final game, more than likely, for Carolina. So that's going to be the key there to slowing down their defensive line. You look at their linebacker unit, solid room. They've been, I would classify it as all right. Caden Fordham is their linebacker that pretty much everybody in the conference knows this year. He's a guy that's graded out really well in run defense, has had some issues at times in pass coverage. I mean, he's allowed 382 yards, so that's an area that Carolina will hopefully attack in this game. Attacking the middle of the field is going to be important for the Tar Heels in this one if they want to find a way to win the game. But they also have another linebacker in Kenny Soares Jr., who's been struggling this year. He struggled in coverage as well. Has had some missed tackles to his name. So that's certainly someone that Carolina will hope to attack in this game. Not nearly as strong at linebacker as they've been in years past either. And then the secondary's got some guys that have graded out well. But again, this is where you look at Pro Football Focus, and you kind of wonder how exactly some of their grades work. Devon Marshall, now he's a guy, he's been very hit or miss. There have been moments this year, I mean, only 27 of his 60 targets have been caught, which is just a 45% completion percentage against him. But it's for 324 yards. He's allowed 2 touchdowns, but he has 2 interceptions. He's, a guy that is allowing a 59.3 passer rating against. So Carolina's got to be aware of him. There's no doubt about that. But then, when you look at some of the other guys in this secondary, there are definitely some guys that Carolina is going to be able to attack. Ronnie Royal III, Jackson Vick. These are some of the names of guys that have struggled so far this year. Brian Nelson II, even though he grades out relatively well, he still allowed 28 catches for 40 yards, or 28 catches out of the 40 targets, 421 yards, and 3 touchdowns so far this year. He's allowing, as opposed to what Marshall is allowing, a 129.3 passer rating. Some of these other guys, it's very similar. So this is something that Carolina should be able to attack in this game. And part of that is going to be Carolina's got to attack it with their short passing game, but you also have to be able to hit some big plays down the field against the secondary that is struggling. So that's going to be one of the big things for Carolina in this game. If they're going to take down NC State, it's going to be attacking that struggling passing defense.
Yeah, look, if Carolina struggles to move the football through the air, I think that'll really be the nail in the coffin for Freddie Kitchens as your play caller and probably Gio Lopez as your quarterback. Once Belichick begins to evaluate the season and they really start putting together a list of priorities for the upcoming offseason with their eye on the transfer portal, which will open, of course, in January. We knew coming into the year that NC State was going to struggle on this side of the ball. Just, with all the personnel losses, you lost your defensive coordinator, so on and so forth. I don't think we ever saw this coming because under Doran, they've just been pretty steady. Now, part of this is, that their defensive coordinator, whose name is slipping my mind right now.
DJ Elliott.
Yeah, he endured something during the season that you don't wish upon your worst enemy. And, certainly thoughts and prayers are still continued with him and his family. Like, you do got to just wonder how dialed in has he been, because, he has bigger things than football going on in his life. But it's still just weird seeing State be this bad defensively. And hopefully Carolina is ready to exploit that. The good news is Gio Lopez is coming off his best game as a Tar Heel last week. That was probably the person I hurt the most for in that loss to Duke was him, because I thought he played really well. And he played well with pressure in his face and made a lot of throws and looked like the Gio Lopez that we were kind of sold on when Carolina went and got him in the transfer portal out of South Alabama. How does he follow that up? And is Freddie Kitchens confident enough to put together a game plan that can take advantage of a pass defense that has had 0 to no resistance all year long? I think that's going to be real interesting to see. Yes, I think we want to see Carolina run it. And I want to see a commitment to getting Davian Goss and, Damon June the football. But Carolina, if they're going to win the game, they're going to have to throw it. And they need to be able to hit some explosive plays, Ship, Paysor, Green, whoever it is. They got to get some big plays down the field. So, I think it's going to be kind of a matchup, to watch. A defense that cannot stop anybody against an offense that's had a hard time cracking 20 against power conference competition for most of the season.
Yeah, it's the two, immovable forces, or very movable forces, going up against each other, and who's going to come out with the most success. I think that's, certainly something that's going to be a big question going into this game. I mean, man, this Tar Heel passing game, yeah, it's had its moments during the season where it's looked decent. Last week was one of those moments, and so hopefully they're able to build on that. One of the key things for them is going to be they have to be able to create plays after the catch. This is going to be on the playmakers that are in this roster to create some explosive plays. whether it's the wide receivers, the tight ends, or the running backs. You're going to have to make plays after the catch. And so we'll see whether or not this is a game where they're able to do that. If they are, then it's going to be, then Carolina has a chance to win this game. If not, then, they got to bank on State missing a lot of tackles and them finding some ways to move the ball down the field consistently, or just blowing coverages, and Gio Lopez hit some big plays over the top. We've talked about his struggles throwing the deep ball, so that's not necessarily going to be easy. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up here during the Tar Heel storylines. But you look at the special teams unit for NC State, not nearly as good as they've been in years past. Caden Noonkester, solid punting year, averaging 43.5 yards per punt. That's not bad. The kicking game, this is what's weird. They've only attempted 5 or 8 field goals so far this year, and they've only made 5 of them. So hasn't been overly successful. Kanoa Vincent is their guy that handles most of their kicking duties. Nick Konoseki was a guy who got a look there at one time at kicker, but it looks like Vincent is the guy that is handling everything down the stretch here for them. And so he's the guy that they're relying on here in this game to make field goals, but not nearly as automatic as some of the NC State kickers that we've seen in years past. You go to the return games, very similar to Carolina in that they just are not getting anything on returns. I mean, kick returns, you got Jaden Scott, who's handling most of those, averaging 21.3 yards per return. Meanwhile, punt returns, they've got Teddy Hoffman and Terrell Anderson, who has split those duties, and they're averaging 4 and 3.6 yards per return average, respectively. So definitely not anywhere near as good as they've been in years past on special teams. You go to the Tar Heel storylines for this game. And really, I mean, this brings up an interesting question right off the bat, because you have brought this up. You said last week, and I don't remember if you said it here on the podcast. I think you did, but I know you've said it on the air, and you've said it on the air at WFNZ, that is. And off the air, you have said that you would treat this game basically like a look ahead to next season. Carolina, pretty much, on the precipice of being eliminated for a bowl game. This is still a chance for Carolina to keep very thin hopes alive for that. But you have said that you would treat this basically as like a preseason game for next year. Get a look at some of the quarterbacks that you've got in that quarterback room with Arturi Newkirk, Bryce Baker. Really figure out some of the other positions, who's worth keeping around. Do you think that is the way that the staff should handle this game against NC State, with the fact that they are 4-7 going into this one?
I mean, if I want to be 100% honest with you, that answer is no. They should play to win the game. I don't think they're going to win the game, so I'm just being real cynical because I don't want to give Dave Doran the satisfaction of getting 5 straight wins over us. But I do think if you just peel back what I'm saying and you hear me out, it's not the wildest thing if Carolina were to make that decision in this era where rosters change overnight, and you want to figure out just exactly who all you got coming back for next year, and maybe where you need to go address needs as you still continue to recruit. The recruiting class is now up to 40, something you'll talk about a little later on in the show. And then as you start putting together your list of needs for the transfer portal. But like if Carolina, like if that was a decision that they made, I would not hate it. Just simply because even if they were to win, do we think this program's going to a bowl game? You'll be playing in early to mid-December. Belichick's probably got to be in Nantucket with his girlfriend. He's probably got a vacation or two booked that he doesn't want to pay the cancellation fee. Like, I doubt Carolina would go, even though I would say you need to go to get the practice reps. But,
yep.
It's like that's kind of been my approach is, hey, I don't think Carolina can win. Or I don't think Carolina's going to win. I don't want to give that jackass the satisfaction of beating me for 5 straight times. So throw the game. Play the backups. Play as many guys on the roster. Get some film. get some evaluation of these guys and figure out kind of how you want to operate moving forward. They're not going to do that. I do think there will come a day in time, whether it's Carolina or some other program, you'll see this happen. We started seeing guys sit out of bowl games within the last decade. I do think you'll start to see these coaches, especially that maybe they know that they're safe for that year, but next year is going to be a make or break year. You'll see them use that final game. There's nothing on the line as an evaluation period to kind of figure out where their roster stands going into the off season. So I don't think that's going to be what they do, but if they did it, I could find a way to defend it.
Yeah, I would hope that that's not the mindset that they're taking going into this game. But, I mean, is it possible? Anything is possible, especially with this coaching staff. My thing would be you want to come out, you want to win this game to sort of build momentum for next year. And to me, I mean, they should be wanting to go to a bowl game because you get the extra practices. So, I mean, those practices, what we've seen in the past is that teams are able to bring in the guys that they have signed in the early signing period, and they allow them to practice with them. Doesn't mean they get to play in the bowl game, but still those extra practices where you have those guys with you, that's going to be huge, especially if you want to play those guys next year like it seems like Belichick and the staff want to do. They want those guys to be contributors for them next season and not necessarily have to go into the transfer portal as much as they did this past year to find guys to plug into this lineup that are going to be starters. So, I mean, if that's the mindset that you're taking, well, then you should take the mindset of we need to go out and win this game. We need to make it to a bowl game, and we need to play in that bowl game. But as you said, I mean, would it shock me if he has already scheduled a trip and he doesn't necessarily want to give up on that? Or, in what would be, the more football side of things, just say, hey, let's focus on next season. Let's put this season behind us. Nothing at this point would shock me. I think how you should handle this game is you should come out looking to win the game. If you get down by that significant of a margin, then you should pull some guys and you should start to look and evaluate the rest of the roster. Like if you get into the second half of this game and you're down by 21 or something like that, then just put in the backups. Let's see what you got throughout the rest of this roster. Figure out who deserves to still be around for next season and just let the season mercifully come to an end. But if you're in a competitive game, then I think you should try to win it. And, I think there are going to be some guys that are going to be motivated. I mean, especially that defensive side of the ball. A lot of these guys are going to be trying to show that they're deserving of sticking around for Carolina, or for some of them, they may even be playing to go to bigger schools. Guys like Milcard Abujade, Tyler Thompson, guys that were producing in that middle portion of the season, they could be looking to go to bigger schools here in the offseason. And guys on the offensive side of the ball, mainly a guy like Gio Lopez, could be looking to just prove that he deserves to stick around with this program. So I think you owe it to those kids to at least try to win this game. But I understand where your thinking is coming from. I would love to at least just take away the satisfaction if Carolina does get beat and say, hey, we were playing a bunch of backups, didn't really mean anything. But, I think this is one of those games that I still want really badly. And so I hope the staff comes out with the mindset of trying to win it. If they're going to do that, one thing that needs to happen is this defense has to fight back. And it has been 2 straight weeks of rough performances for Carolina's defense after they looked so good in those 4 games in the middle of the season. We thought this group was hitting its stride. It was the reason that we trusted them against Wake Forest. It was the reason that we thought Carolina might be able to bounce back against Duke. And that just wasn't the case. Carolina's gotten pushed around in each of these last 2 games. We'll talk about the defensive line specifically, but I've been shocked as well at the play of a guy like Kamori House, who has had his 2 worst games of the season here in these last 2 games. The secondary, at times getting carved up. Thaddeus Dixon comes back from injury, looks, like a shell of himself. in that game against Duke. So if Carolina is going to find a way to win this game, they're going to have to fight back after 2 weeks of being dominated by the offenses that they have faced for the most part.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think that's probably going to be the staff's challenge to them, because this is going to be the most emotional game Carolina's played so far this season, and it's going to be the most physical. That's how rivalry games are. And especially when we're on the road and we're in that hellhole of a stadium. And so Carolina's got they have no choice. Because we've talked about so long, before last week, I mean, you weren't really able to win conference games if you scored less than 20 points. Last week you get to 25, but it ultimately wasn't enough, to get the job done. And the defense, while it played well in certain spots, they couldn't get off the field. They couldn't get off the field on fourth down. They gave them some big third down conversions as well. So, they'll be looking to bounce back, because they know that they're the strength of the team. They know that how well they play really determines Carolina's chance to win. If they hold up and they give up 20 or fewer, Carolina's got a shot. If it's more what we saw last week, where Duke was just able to get every play that they needed, it was more like what you saw against Wake Forest, where Wake Forest could just grind out drives and finish drives in a manner that Carolina couldn't. This is going to be tough for Carolina to win the game. So, you mentioned it. Their offensive line is average at best. It's not the best offensive line we've seen here recently. Can Melcar Abushide, can Tyler Thompson, can those guys respond and really be the impactful players they were during that 2-2 stretch, where we were talking about just how far Carolina had come since the second bye week? But you're going to need a Smith Billboard. You're going to need an Isaiah Johnson, a Dontre Robinson. You're going to need those guys to step up and play well too. It all starts up front, man. That's just the nature of the beast. That's the nature of rivalry week. Trench play is important. Is as important as any game that you play all year long. And this isn't an offensive line that should overwhelm a Carolina defensive line that might be somewhat undersized, that might be somewhat run down with how much they've had to play. So I think it'll be interesting to see just kind of where their mindset is. I think knowing the competitors that this group has turned into, I think they're chomping at the bit after the way that they just didn't finish the game against Duke a few weeks last week. And there were plays that if they make, I think Carolina goes on to win. I think they'll be ready to respond and put on a performance on Saturday that gives Carolina a chance to win the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the group that I'm looking at the most, is that defensive line. And you can say, hey, we need them to be able to rush the passer really well. Well, here's the thing. It starts on first and second down. And in this game, you're going up against a pretty good rushing attack. I know you said that this is a team that's going to pass to open up the run, but they have a really successful running back tandem. So they are going to lean on them. And even if they do end up, throwing on those early downs, you've got to be able to win up front and really put some pressure on the quarterback if he's trying to get the ball out quickly. But I'm looking at the interior of that defensive line being better than they've been the last 2 weeks, because we just have not seen that group step up the last 2 weeks. They've been pushed around on the interior. It's led to some easy running lanes for guys like Damon Claiborne and Anderson Castle a week ago for Duke. Damon Claiborne, of course, for Wake Forest. But both of those guys have had success on the interior for Carolina, where you look at the interior of those offensive lines that you played, those weren't necessarily the strongest interior offensive linemen. This is going to be a group that's having some issues in there as well. Can you take advantage of it? This is where you need that four-man rotation. Isaiah Johnson, DeAndre Robinson, CJ Mims, and Leroy Jackson. They have to step up in this game. This has to be the best game that they have played in the last three for them. And so I think, Carolina, it will get that type of performance from those guys, because I think they've got one more week in them, hopefully, It's just, how consistent are they in this game? Because if they struggle with consistency like they did in the last 2 weeks, then they're going to allow some big gains. I trust a little bit more the guys on the edges to bounce back a little bit, to be able to get a little bit more pressure. But the other thing is that, last week they were able to get pressure on the quarterback. Mensah was under some decent pressure throughout the game. You've got to be able to finish it. That's the most important thing for Carolina, is that when you are getting pressure, you have to be able to finish that pressure with sacks. And so hopefully that's what Carolina will be able to do in this game. Go over to the offensive side of the ball, and look, the offense looking for the best performance of the season against the worst pass defense in the entire country. And so I think the biggest thing in this game is you're just looking for your playmakers to step up. Even though this is a team that is the worst pass defense in the entire country, you still got to be able to run the football in this game if you're Carolina. You look at the games that Carolina has won and the games that they have won the most easily this year. You go back to that Syracuse game, you go back to the game against Richmond, and I know that that's an FCS opponent, but still, those games, Carolina was really able to run the football at a high level, dictate the line of scrimmage, and be able to run in between the tackles and on the edges. I think most importantly, Carolina's got to be able to run it on the edge, because I don't think that you're guaranteed to be able to run it inside the tackle. So if they can run it off that left and right edge, then I think that that's going to lead to some success in the running game. But in the passing game, everybody's got to be able to turn some of those short passes into big plays throughout the night. This is where you lean on your stars. This is where you lean on guys like Jordan Shipp, Kobe Paysor, Damon June, when you set him up on some of those screens. And no matter how you get the ball to him out of the backfield, Davian Goss, you got to get him involved in this game as a playmaker. I think if they can do that in this game, then this is what is going to lead to the success for Carolina in the passing game. You're not going to see these big explosive plays downfield for Carolina. They just don't have that type of guy. But I do think that your hope is that they will be able to create some plays after the catch and really turn some of those short gains into explosive plays throughout the evening for Carolina.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what you said about the run game. I agree with you that I think they need to run off the edge, but they need to make sure they're running off tackle with the right personnel, that being Davian Goss, who that's where he's at his best as a runner. Use Damon June up the middle, because you at least got to run it up the middle just so you make the defense have to respect that aspect of your run game. But pound it up the middle with June, and then hit them off tackle with Goss, because that's where both of those guys are at their best in those two collective running styles. When it comes to the passing game, I think you got to see a little bit of what you saw a week ago, where it just felt like it was as in rhythm as it's been. It was on time as much as it's been, and some of it was Gio just trusting the pocket and making plays. But I also think, you've got to continue to try to push the football vertically down the field. But I think you really want to get, Shipp and some of these other guys on these deep to intermediate crossing routes where they're running 15, 17 yards across the middle of the football field. And if Gio can get those balls to them, that's where they're really dangerous. Because then by that point, you're running against the second level of the defense. And that's where these guys can really thrive. You don't have someone that you can throw the football to and you ask them to go make a catch on a go ball. That just doesn't appear to be a part of this offense 12 weeks into the season. But you can still push the football down the field in other ways. And against a group that has struggled this mightily all year long against stopping the pass, I think it's fair to expect Carolina, if they're going to, one, be competitive in this game, B, win the game, they're going to have to hit, I'd probably say 3, 4, maybe 5 of those passes over the course of 60 minutes. We know it's not their bread and butter, so they're not going to look to do it, but it's whenever those plays are there that your offense has kind of built towards. It's really being able to execute, and that starts with your quarterback making an accurate throw, and then your guys going to and making plays. I think there are going to be plays there to be made. It's just, is this offense ready to make them? Last week should suggest yes, because you could argue that's the best offense Carolina has played in a conference game this season that they ended up getting beat in. And a big reason why was because of your quarterback. If he's as tough as he was last week, if you make some of the throws he made last week, and you maybe add an explosive play or two into the mix, I think Carolina might have enough to be there in the fourth quarter, which I think is all we're asking for this group going into the game.
Yeah, and one of the things that you brought up there is attacking the middle of the field, and that's what Carolina's got to do. I mean, these linebackers have struggled so far this year in pass coverage. They've been picked on a lot. You look at the safeties, that's an area where NC State has struggled. A lot of yards have come in that area as well. This is where, those guys getting those crossing routes across the middle, finding ways to win in that area, winning on some of these slant routes. I think that's certainly where Carolina can find some yards throughout the day. And then, could you get a tight end to maybe have a little bit of success? That would be nice in this game. We saw it a couple of weeks ago with Jake Johnson, but that disappeared last week in the game against Duke. You didn't see anybody really have any sort of success in that area. And so hopefully, Carolina will be able to respond to that. Hopefully, using those running backs out of the backfield too could be something that allows Carolina to have success. That's what you've got to be able to do. And most importantly, like I said, you've got to be able to do what teams have done to you this year. One of the big things for Carolina that we didn't talk about on the defensive side of the ball is their secondary has to be able to tackle in this game. We've seen it that it's been a big problem for them this year. It's led to a lot of yards after the catch. And I think that's going to be one of the things that Carolina has to do to NC State in this game is create a lot of those yards after the catch. Get the ball in your playmakers' hands and then let them go to work. We've seen it from guys like Kobe Paysour and Jordan Shipp in the last few weeks, or as the season has gone along at least. They've been able to make plays like that. I think that's got to be your focus again in this game. And, man, if you could find somebody in that slot. We've talked about it all year long that they have thrown so many different guys at that position, whether it's Javarius Green, who started the year there for the team in that slot position. Shenard Clower has been in there. He's been, on and off the field throughout the year. Madrid Tucker, he sort of disappeared here these last couple of weeks after being a big part of what Carolina was doing when they were winning the two games that they did win. I think those are certainly guys that have the ability to make plays, but you've got to be able to get the ball to them in this one, and you've got to find one that you can roll with that can give you the most production at that position. I think that's Javarius Green. I think he's the most consistent out of that group, but we'll see if Carolina can find that guy in this game against NC State. Hopefully they can have some success throwing the football. The last thing that we'll talk about from a Tar Heels perspective before we get to the keys to the game and then our predictions is how does this team handle playing with the no postseason potentially on the line? Now, for them, I think they are going to have the, they are going to have the luxury of knowing that they're going to have a chance to play in a bowl game because so far they've gotten all the breaks that they've needed in terms of teams that needed to win to get to bowl eligibility, not necessarily getting to bowl eligibility. So they've gotten some of those breaks. So now maybe going into tomorrow, I think there was a scenario where if a few teams won today, then Carolina would have nothing to play for in terms of the postseason. That didn't happen. So maybe that having that postseason on the line will really matter. But even if they don't have that postseason on the line, I think really figuring out the mindset of this team is going to be important going into this game. Are they going to be motivated or are they going to be crushed by the season that they've had so far where they sit 4-7 and on the outside looking in of possibly going to a bowl game?
Yeah, look, you would like to think they're going to be ready to play, especially the guys that are holdovers from Mac Brown's, tenure here, because we haven't beaten this team in 4 years. And hopefully that registers with them, because I know it sure as hell registers with me. I hear about it every single day at work. And so while you don't have anything to play for in terms of going to the postseason, you could, a win doesn't salvage the year, but at least gives us something to point back to whenever we have to evaluate Bill Belichick's tenure as Carolina's head coach. Hopefully you can point back to that game and say, well, remember when Carolina beat State and that ... set up for him to win an ACC championship or whatever it is, or ... maybe that's led him to the NFL when we were able to hire a coach who doesn't have a girlfriend 50 years younger than him. I don't know, but it's still something that you can point to. And I hope that's what I'm expecting to see. Because hopefully they haven't thrown in the towel. No, the season hasn't gone the way that it's gone, but hopefully you don't want to lose to and inferior your program for a 5th straight year and have to hear about it. Because if you do, we heard, how Brent Renner described just the awful feeling that comes to losing to them. We felt that feeling 4 straight years. That should be enough to whether you got postseason expectations on the line or not. Just don't want that feeling in your mouth. So, Jordan ships it after the Duke game that they expected to be just as chippy, just as fiery, just as competitive. So I think that was his way of already trying to get their mindset right for this game. And hopefully this is a group that comes out and competes and doesn't roll over and play dead. We'll have to wait and see. These games are as tricky as they've ever been because so many guys have probably already checked out because they're thinking about the portal, the draft, no matter what it is. But hopefully Belichick has this group ready to go because I think the last thing we want to see is this team be not competitive against NC State for what feels like the umpteenth time in the last handful of years.
Yeah, and I really hope that Bill Belichick understands how important this game is. He says that he does, but I really hope that it is hit home for him. And I hope that comment from Dave Doran last week will certainly be one that he will use as extra motivation. I also hope that somebody that was a part of this locker room for the last couple of years will show him the video of what was said a few years ago about this team, because that should be enough for you to be pissed off and want to play tough in this game. And I think one of the things that, you got to make sure of is that you are more disciplined than you were last week, but come out with that fire, come out ready for a fight, come out ready to be physical, ready to play with toughness, ready to do the things that we heard a Bill Belichick team was going to do in Chapel Hill. And there are some guys that are going to be looking to stick around next year. Those are the guys that you need on the field in this game. And if there are guys that are already have told you, hey, man, I'm looking towards the portal, well, then guess what? You ain't playing in this game. We're looking for the guys that we know are wanting to stick around and be a part of this group next year and that want to beat this team, because it needs to be communicated to the guys on this roster that are coming over from different schools. They need to know just how personal this rivalry is and how there is a reason why this is one of the fiercest rivalries in the ACC, why this has become the one that has some of the most bad blood between the two sides. And so hopefully that's the mindset that this team comes out with. Hopefully the staff gets behind that as well, and they're going to be motivated. I don't have any doubt that the staff is going to be motivated outside of Bill Belichick. I wonder how motivated he's going to be for this game, because everybody else, they are coaching for jobs, because there is no guarantee that these guys are going to be back next year. I think, just about everybody on this staff has to wonder whether or not they are going to have a job with this group next season, because you look around, where are the areas where Carolina's really had a ton of success in? There aren't many that you can point to. So I think they're going to be motivated for this game. I hope that the players are going to be motivated for this game. It's just about, will Bill Belichick be motivated for a rivalry that should be to him like the New York Jets were in his time with the New England Patriots. Again, we have no idea why he hated the New York Jets the way that he did, but it was unlike anything else for him when it came to playing that team. He hated them with a passion. He made sure that every time that his team played them, they were up to the task to be able to face them. And so hopefully that's the same one that he takes towards NC State, because as you said, Bryn Renner said how difficult it is to lose to them. And guess what? He only lost, I think, twice to them, if I'm remembering his career correctly. Maybe 3 times. Maybe he was on the roster for a third loss to them. But he won 2 games against NC State. These guys, I mean, there are guys on this roster that have yet to win a game against NC State. They should be motivated to be able to do that, especially with some of the things that are going to be hurled their way when they come out of that tunnel for that game on Saturday. They have to be prepared to hear just about anything, and hopefully that drives this group to be able to come out with a win and keep their bowl, their hopes of a bowl game alive, but really just get a win that you can build on for next year, get a win that could lead to the firing of the guy that has been talking so much crap about Carolina over all these years, and give you something satisfying to look back on from this season. Now, in order to do that, how does Carolina win this game? Well, the first key to the game is stay disciplined. Last week, that was the first time that we had a conversation about Carolina really struggling with penalties all season long. For the most part, they've been really, really good in that area. But for some reason last week, everything just completely melted down. Carolina had not only issues with illegal substitutions, stuff like that, that are easily correctable by the coaching staff, but even more so, you had the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, a personal foul penalty that are easy to iron out for this game. This is going to be a game where NC State's going to try to bait you into a lot of unnecessary penalties. Carolina's got to be stronger than that in this one. Learn from what they did last week if they want to come away with a victory on the road in Raleigh.
Yeah, you can't commit 12 penalties at home and win. You can't commit 12 penalties on the road and expect to win. I think you have one 15-yard penalty. I think you get a pass because I think you expect something to happen at some point. Pushing, shoving, whatever. It just cannot carry over and that be something that happens the way that it happened the last 7.5 minutes of the game last week. And understand that, yeah, they're going to try to bait you. Jordan Shipp pretty much said that in his post-game presser last week. That we know what the environment's going to be like. We understand they're going to try to get us to buy in because that's what State wants. And the second that you do it, you just told them that they're in your head and that they've already mentally beaten you. And so look, it's not going to be easy. This is the toughest environment Carolina will have played in all year long. It'll be probably the wildest environment they've played in all year long. It's a late game at 7:30. We've seen what that crowd can be like for night games, and so you're gonna have to be poised, man. And after what happened against Duke, this was probably the biggest theme of practice all week long, and so I think this will really be a really good telltale sign. Did Belichick was this the week they finally tuned Belichick out, or does he still have their attention? Or are they still buying what he's selling? So. You can't have that many 15-yard penalties in a game. It impacts field position in a way that you're not good enough to overcome on either side of the ball. You put yourself in a position to maybe have players get ejected. That's no good either. So Carolina's got to take it, be willing to dish it out, but dish it out within the guidelines of what's legal and what's not.
Yeah, I mean, Bryn Renner said it that, they had a pass in their games to take a 15-yard penalty. Some of these guys early in the game, look, everybody can't take a 15-yard penalty, but if you're going to do it, the time to do it is early in the game. Don't let it get out of hand, but if you're going to get into a back and forth, make it early. And then when it comes to clutch time, especially if you're in a close game, you got to be smart. You got to make sure that you get out of any of those scrums without getting a flag thrown on you so that you can keep yourself in a good position to be able to win the game. I think that's the most important thing for Carolina. We want to see that aggressiveness, but at the same time, you got to be smart, and that's what we're hoping that we're going to get from a Bill Belichick coach team at some point this year. We haven't really seen it. Maybe this is the game where we finally get it. The second key to the game, win the line of scrimmage. Always seems like a very important thing, but especially when you play NC State, that's very important. If you are able to win the line of scrimmage in this game, if your defensive line can win it, which I think is the one that you have the most confidence in because we've seen it at times this year. The offensive line, they've had very few moments where they've done it, but the defensive line, they had that consistent stretch where they won for 4 straight weeks. Can they do it again in this one? Can they dig deep and find something within them that allows them to be able to, one, stop the running game at a pretty successful level? And that's everybody. I talked earlier about the importance of the guys in the middle at being able to stop the run game. That's where it starts. But on the edge, you have to be able to seal an edge at the rate that you were in the middle portion of the season. Carolina has not done that the last 2 weeks, especially last week. Nate Shepard was able to have some success on the ground for Duke in that game, running outside of the tackles. This has to be a much better game from those edge rushers in terms of sealing the edge and making sure that they make tackles when they are there to be made in the run game. But at the same time, they've got to be able to get after the quarterback, and it's got to result in sacks, as I said earlier. That group has to win, and then your offensive line, first, you got to figure out the combination that you want to use up there. Are you wanting to use Jordan Hall, or you're going to roll with Miles McVay at left tackle? I thought, believe it or not, even though the Pro Football Focus grades would disagree with me, I thought with Miles McVay in there, things were better for Carolina, especially in the run game. So I would roll with him as your left tackle, and then everybody else just has to be able to win at a pretty consistent rate. I know you're not going to win every single rep, but it cannot be like last year where Carolina just got absolutely dominated from the word go. I don't think a single guy won a one-on-one matchup any single snap that they took last season in that game. So this is a game where you've got to be able to win more often than not if you're going to find a way to win. I trust the defensive line to be able to win their matchup a little bit more, but it's got to be both sides that win their matchup if Carolina is going to win this game.
Yeah, when you look at it from the offensive line perspective, I was with you. I thought with McVay, it just felt more fluid. I thought Carolina just was able to get where they wanted to get to up front with him. I thought he's quicker. I thought he was a lot mobile, a lot more agile. And so I would prefer to see him over a guy like Jordan Hall. I think for this defensive line, it's really at this point, man, it's about toughening it up. And just look at yourself in the mirror and realizing in the last 2 weeks, you've got taken advantage of. You were better, you were bested. And how are you going to respond? The good news is this offensive line, I don't think nowhere near as good as what you saw at different points in time the last 2 weeks. So can you win on early downs? Can you get off blocks? Can you set them up in 2nd and 8s, 3rd and 7s? That way you can just know that when it's 3rd and 7, you know they're going to throw it. And then, Boujade and Thompson and all these guys can just pin their ears back and just go cause havoc and be in the backfield. And then when you're in the backfield, you've got to finish the play. There were so many times that they created a muddy pocket for Darian Mensah last week, but he was able to step out of it and make plays. And, okay, part of it, you got to give him credit. He's a hell of a player, but part of that, too, is just you got to make plays. Like, you got to finish the play that's there to be made. We've talked about it so much when we recapped Carolina's basketball loss to Michigan State. It does nothing for you if you win the first 6 seconds, but you don't win the last 2. So if you win up front, that's great, but then you got to get a sack or force him to a part where he's throwing the ball away, but can't turn and try to make a completion downfield. So we know how important trench play is every single week. It goes to a different level in rivalry games, and I think whichever offensive line sets the tone for their offense, I think we'll have a really good chance to come out with the win.
Last key to the game is to convert in the red zone, and that means convert those plays, those points into touchdowns. Those need to be, whenever you get a possession in the red zone, it has to be 6. It cannot be you kicking a field goal for Carolina. They've got to be, efficient with their chances when they get down there. I don't know how many times they're going to be down there. I'm hoping that it's a decent amount for Carolina in this game. But when you get there, it has to be touchdowns that are scored because this is going to be an NC State team that's going to be able to score points more than likely on your defense, unless you just have one of those performances that you had early in the season. And I mean, look, you look at last week, they won 21-11. So it's not like they're winning or they're winning games like they were early in the season, or competing in games like they were early in the season where they were scoring a bunch of points. That's sort of disappeared a little bit here in recent weeks, where teams have been able to figure out their offense a little bit and slow them down. Hopefully you can do the same. But even if they do end up scoring 21, 24 points in this game, I don't know how many chances your offense is going to have. So when you get into the red zone, most important thing is that you come away with touchdowns if you want to win this game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. First thing you got to do, and because it's not a given with this offense, you got to get there. You got to sustain drives. This cannot be a game where your offense stalls when you get inside the 40 like it was against Wake Forest. But this is probably a game that, depending on what it looks like down distance where you are, I probably want Carolina to chase points in this one. And if you got a 4th and 2 at the 8, might want you to go for it. You got a 4th and goal at the 3, might want you to go for it. Just because, I don't know if kicking field goals on the road against an offense that is as potent as this one is capable of being is going to get the job done. That's where really being able to run the ball comes into play, because when the field conditions, it's harder to make throws. But, you saw you had a play last week where you just threw a ball up to Jordan Chip. You went and made a play. Don't be afraid to do that when you get inside the 20-yard line. Use those tight ends. Bring those guys into the equation. So, when Carolina gets there, this cannot be a game where they get 4 red zone trips but get 1 touchdown. This has to be probably got to be perfect almost. You're getting there 2, 3, 4 times. We probably need touchdowns on every single one of those possessions, because State is going to put up a decent amount of points one way or another. And I don't know what that number looks like, but they're going to score. So this has been a struggle for Carolina all year long. That's why their offense ranks to where it is, in terms of the ACC and all college football. But if they can convert when they get down there to tomorrow, that goes a real long way to them being competitive on the road in Raleigh.
All right, time to get to our predictions. It's going to be a 7:30 kick over on the ACC network tomorrow night in Raleigh. What do you expect in this one from the Tar Heels?
Yeah, we have a rule, right, where we don't pick State on the podcast. I'm not in any mood to break that rule. I'll say this is as little trust, faith, and belief I have in Carolina going into this game since the losing streak started. Part of that is talent, part of that is coaching, and part of that is just I don't know if we've corrected the main issue that exists in this game. I don't know if this game means as much to our kids as it means as much to their kids. With that being said, Bill Belichick said that he understands how important this game is, what it means to the school, the community, and the fan base. I'll take him at his word. He hasn't beaten the equivalent of the Bills and the Dolphins so far, because he's lost to Wake Forest and he's lost to Duke. But all that can be salvaged with a win against NC State. So give me Carolina on the road, 24-23 to close out the season and salvage what's felt like a pretty much a disappointing year one of the Bill Belichick campaign. But we'll go off on a high note with a win that should set us up for legitimate momentum heading into year 2.
Yeah, as you said, there is a rule on this show. We do not ever pick NC State, and I will never pick them ever. It does not matter how little faith I have in Carolina. I will always pick them. And you look at some of the bad seasons that Carolina has had in recent memory in 2017, 2018, especially that 2018 game. Now, that was at home, but Carolina put up a fight in that game. And I think this is going to be one of those games where Carolina is going to want to go out fighting. Now, I hope it's not a brawl on the field. I hope that it is Carolina fighting till the end in this game. And I think last week, they got a taste of what it was like to be a part of one of the rivalries last week. Duke, they definitely were a little more physical, and there was a little more pushing and shoving than I thought we've seen in years past between the two sides. I think this game, they will learn pretty quickly how much this means to Carolina, how much it means to those guys on the other side. And I think that's going to fuel a really strong performance from Carolina. I think these guys are going to be motivated. I think, you said one of the key things that you got to be able to do in this game offensively is move the ball in between the 20s. To be honest with you, they've done that. For the most part, they've been pretty consistent at that. Now, Wake Forest, it was you got to the 40-yard line of Wake Forest and then everything shut down. Last week, they were able to move it pretty consistently inside the 20s. They were able to put some points up on the board, but they just couldn't get the defensive stops when they needed to, and the offense shut down at the most important time in the game. This game, I think it's going to be a little bit different. I think Carolina learns from what happened last week. They make enough plays late in the game, and I think they're going to get it done against NC State. I'm with you. It's probably as little faith as I've had that they're actually going to be able to get it done in a long time, probably since that 2018 season. But I do believe that Carolina in this game will come out motivated to win this rivalry game. I think Bill Belichick will have these guys ready to go for this rivalry game. And I think they're hoping that they can get into the postseason and slip in there, even though they didn't necessarily get to that 6-win mark this season. So I think they put together their best performance of the year. I think they finished this one off 28-27 over NC State. All right, a couple of closing notes on the way out of here. All these recruiting notes for Carolina as they land 4 prospects since the last time that we were on here in the 2026 class. Now, of course, it's been 5 within a week. So you have Jordan Avenger, the 3-star linebacker that Carolina landed. We told you a little bit about him on the last edition. Then they also landed Jonah Rodriguez. I think we might have mentioned him on the last edition, but if we didn't, he is a JUCO offensive tackle that Carolina got. Really like his size. Think he's a guy that's going to be able to play offensive tackle, but provide some versatility, being a guy that has played guard, that has played center. So there's a lot to his game that I think Carolina fans will like when he gets here. Then you've got 3-star Julian Peterson, a guy who's a high-end 3-star, ranked inside of the top 700 in the country, but, not ranked inside of that top 500 to be considered a blue chip prospect. Still really like him. I love the length that he brings on the outside. Going to be a guy that Carolina, I think, can use out there at corner sooner rather than later because just how shifty he is, how well he gets in and out of breaks. I think he's certainly going to be a guy that a lot of Carolina fans are going to like. And then you've got the same day that he ended up flipping his commitment from Penn State, or it was a long-term flip. He had been decommitted from Penn State for a while. Guy that was currently at the time committed to Purdue, Chemistry Young, a guy that I think a lot of people didn't even know was really on Carolina's radar. He ends up flipping from Purdue. We had some rumblings on that day that he was a guy who was potentially looking to flip. I think it might have even started the day before that he was a guy that was on campus, was potentially looking to flip. This guy is incredibly explosive. So you were looking for a guy that created a little bit of explosion down the field for Carolina. This year they've really been lacking it. Well, this is one of the guys that's going to be able to bring that. And I think he's one of the most underrated players in this class. I mean, this is a guy that's averaging 23.5 yards per reception out of Sarasota, Florida. A very, very explosive player, both with the ball in his hands and before the catch. So I think this is a name that you need to get familiar with if you're a Carolina fan. Jumped on the radar late, ends up flipping from Purdue. So some people may be asking just how good he is, but he is a guy that's ranked inside of the top 1,000. I think he will be someone that could come in here and really surprise some people early on in his time in Chapel Hill. And then finally, the guy that ended up flipping his commitment today, another flip from Penn State. Carolina has done a really good job of that. This will be the fourth flip that they got from Penn State after James Franklin, of course, was fired. That would be Adam McCann Gibbs, who is going to be used as a punter for Carolina. He is coming in from Northern Ireland, where he went to school up there. He is originally from Ireland. So this is a guy that I think Carolina is going to be looking at as potentially their punter starting as soon as next year. He'll be in there to compete with Jacob Horvath, who transferred in, of course, from Eastern Illinois last offseason. He's been the backup to Tom McGinnis, who's going to be gone at the end of the season. Can't really tell you a whole lot about him. I watched a couple of videos of him punting. I think he's pretty solid. I also think he's a really solid kicker if Carolina was to ever need one in an emergency situation. So definitely a guy that's going to be coming in here looking to compete. And the fact that he was committed to Penn State certainly tells you that he's got a lot of talent on his plate. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughVlog.com. Tomorrow morning, we'll have the preview for the NC State game up there for you guys. So make sure you go and check that out for us. We'd really appreciate that. Of course, we'll have the latest availability report. Pretty simplistic one this week. Most of the guys that are out have been out for a while. There's nobody else that knew that has popped up there. So it'll be a pretty straightforward injury report on our side, but see the guys for NC State who are going to be potentially out for the game, as well as we give you the keys to the game. We give you team breakdowns where we go even more in depth on both Carolina and NC State, where they sit coming into the matchup, team stat breakdown. So make sure you go and check that out as well. Projected starting lineups, all that great stuff for you guys there over on the website to have you prepared for this game against the Wolfpack. After that is over, well, then we will recap the game, and there's a good chance that that will be the end of the season for Carolina. If they go to a bowl game, if they have a chance to go to a bowl game, we'll, of course, have you covered on that front. But if they don't, we're going to be covering everything with the offseason. We'll, of course, have the final season grades that will come out to sort of close down the year. That one will probably be after we get through all the craziness that's going to be happening, no matter what happens for Carolina, if they do end up going to a bowl game or not. No matter what happens, we've got signing day that is coming up on Wednesday, early signing day that is. So make sure that you're keeping up with the website. We'll have all the updates that you need. Any of the guys that flip to Carolina, there are expected to be more flips. So make sure that you're locked in with the Heel Tough blog for all of those latest flips from Carolina, where we will break down the film and break down the stats of those guys whenever they do end up committing. So make sure you're checking that out. Also over on the website, covering the basketball season for you guys. Carolina with a tough loss to Michigan State, their first loss of the season. Josh had you covered on that. And then he will have you covered for the game against Kentucky on Tuesday night. A quick-ish turnaround for Carolina. A little bit of a break for Carolina, but still a relatively quick turnaround for them as they get ready for another stiff test on the road in Rupp Arena against Kentucky. We'll have you covered on the podcast side of things, and then Josh will have that article up for you and the recap article up after the game for you. So make sure that you're sticking around on the website for all that. And then, of course, over on the same avenues that you get this podcast, that's the same avenues that you can get the Four Corners podcast. Make sure that you check it out for all of your Carolina basketball needs. So once again, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels and go to Hell State.